He spent 25 years climbing the Navy's ladder, from a shipboard engineer to a helicopter commander to the high-stakes budget wars inside the Pentagon. But then he realized something terrifying about military service. The treadmill eventually stops. And if you don't know where you're stepping off, you're going to fall. Captain Shelby Mounts was a master of outcomes. He led emergency earthquake relief operations in Haiti when demand surged 70% overnight. He managed billion-dollar aviation requirements for the Navy, but when he prepared to retire, the advice he got was brutal. Be humble, take a pay cut. Civilian industry doesn't speak your language. He refused to accept this advice. He didn't just find a job, he hacked the system. He spent a year inside Shell Oil as a fellow. He drank 100 cups of coffee with 100 strangers to find his path. And now he's the Executive Director of NextOp, solving the biggest crisis facing our enlisted veterans: underemployment. In this episode, Shelby breaks down you're staring at the end of your service, if you've been told your skills don't translate, if you are looking for fulfillment, not just a paycheck, this conversation is your roadmap.
The industry doesn't hire for anything, they hire for something.
Welcome to Voice for Valor. All right, Shelby, welcome so much to Voice for Valor. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a couple months.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you inviting me in, and I'm excited about the conversation.
Yeah, it's so inspiring to hear you out there helping soldiers, sailors, and airmen just as much as I had been on my platform. So I'm looking forward to this conversation today. As of right now, I have a few questions set up for you, but obviously we can take it where you want to go. But if you are ready, I will start off with the first question.
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. So your professional summary begins with the powerful line, "Creating sustainable outcomes makes me tick." Looking back at your 25 years in the Navy, from a shipboard engineer to a helicopter pilot and ultimately a captain, what was an early experience that first ignited that passion for driving outcomes that last?
You know, that's an interesting question. I don't think anybody's ever put that one to me like that. I think my call to service certainly preceded my time in the Navy. It runs strong through our family, and I guess an influential experience that I had was right before I started ninth grade. My mom and I trooped over to my future high school and met with my guidance counselor, and he looked at all my academic achievements and clubs and things I had done and said, "Okay, you know, you're tracking towards, advanced courses. What do you think you want to do in school?" And I said, "Well, I've looked at all the job projections and, the highest paid jobs out there are engineers. So I want to be an engineer." And he said, "Well, how are you going to pay for it?" And I said, "Well, I have to figure that out." And he said, "Well, have you considered ROTC or service academies?" And I had this calling to be in the military, but I also wanted to go make money. And it's the first time that I realized you could merge getting your education and a pathway into the military together. Because honestly, at that point, I think my concept of an Army-Navy football game was some sailors and soldiers got together in a stadium and played once a year. I just wasn't all that tuned into it. And so he gave me the guide or the catalog for the Air Force Academy. And I took that home and I opened it up and folded it open, and they had the typical cadet has. And they listed out their GPA and their SAT scores and their sports and all that kind of stuff. And I just put little tick marks now next to each one of them. And I said, well, I've probably got about 3.5 years to hit all that. And I just became very goal focused at that point in time, because my goal was I wanted to get into either an RTC or an academy, get my engineering degree, get an opportunity to go serve and hopefully fly, and then see where that took me. And so that was the beginning of setting goals and building myself towards something. And I think that was a foundational piece of later experiences that taught me how to lead and to lead others to achieve different goals and grow things.
And you knew by ninth grade this is something you were interested in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I started down the path towards the Air Force Academy, even though most of my family had served in primarily Navy, some Army, and a little bit of Air Force. But it wasn't until after ninth grade I moved and went to a different high school closer to the coast in California. And I was a cross country runner. And we had a bunch of guys on the cross country team that were interested in going to fly for the Navy. And so they worked on me for about a year, and then Top Gun came out. And, the rest is history. I ended up becoming a Navy pilot.
So you moving out to California, you started this in ninth grade. Where did you grow up before you went to California?
So I lived in East Texas predominantly until halfway through third grade. And then we moved to San Diego and around a couple different locations in San Diego. So that was third grade through ninth grade was predominantly south in East County. And then we moved in, like I said, a little bit closer to the inland beach area and in a town called La Mesa. And that's where it was very heavy Navy once you got over the hills there.
So was your family in the service, or what was the moving around so it was service? What were your parents doing in service?
So my grandfathers were Navy they were enlisted from World War II to Vietnam, and my parents met while they were still young, and they got married and had me, and my grandfathers started to retire. But I think that as the families continued to still move at the end of their active duty time, my parents found themselves in Key West, Florida with a baby and no family. So off to Dallas, Texas for a few years so that my father could get his education, and then ended up, like I said, down in Southeast Texas for a while. And then I think it was just a little bit in the blood. My mom had graduated from high school in San Diego and really wanted to go back there, so she took us back there. Yeah, part of it was the reality of our financials as well. We didn't have a whole lot of means, and so we kind of moved where we felt like there was opportunities.
I gotcha. So you were a commanding officer of a helicopter squadron. You faced a perfect storm: 73% increase in demand, 58% increase in assets, and an emergency deployment to support the Haiti earthquake relief. Can you take us inside that command and share a story that illustrates your philosophy on leading a high-performance team through intense, sustained pressure?
Yeah, those were such fascinating times. I was blessed that I was leading a squadron that had already made the transition to the new H-60 Sierra. We had had a series of great commanding officers and a good team, but some of our real challenges were around the fact that as the Fleet Training Squadron, we received brand new aircraft off the flight line with the upgraded software that we were only ones authorized to fly initially. So we had to accept these new aircraft, fly them for a certain amount of time, train people in them until the rest of the fleet was authorized, and then transfer those aircraft to fleet squadrons in return for aircraft who had already been used and in many cases needed some pretty heavy maintenance. So that could be a little bit demoralizing for your maintenance force, which is the lion's share of our operation. And we were also the training center for new sailors that were coming in. So we would receive them, get them oriented and basic qualified, and then send them out to fleet squadrons as well to go deployed. So we really were generating both aircraft and personnel for the fleet, and doing it on the backs of a fairly small workforce. And so that, compounded by the challenges with the earthquake and the fact that we weren't even a seagoing unit, but were ordered to send a detachment to sea, which you could only send qualified pilots, and most of our students were not qualified. So we had very few instructors left. We had people out at sea doing missions that they were obviously qualified for, but not expecting to do. So just a lot of hurdles in how we communicated, how we reported, how we managed those teams, and how we made up for some of those challenges. But I had experienced something similar when I was a lieutenant out in San Diego at the first squadron to receive those H-60s. And due to many delays in the authorizations to finally implement training and fly and deliver those to the fleet, we ended up doing a whole year's production in 7 months. And so working through those challenges, maximizing efficiencies, keeping up the morale, and understanding what your goal was was a very similar process that I was able to, I think, bring in and tell the troops, look, this is important. It's important in the real world mission. It's important to support the other units that are going out there and doing their deployments and missions. And it's just our job. And blessed again with great people, great leaders who understood that message and were willing to roll up their sleeves and get it done on a daily basis.
I'm willing to bet that a lot of people that are listening they couldn't even point out Haiti on a map. Can you describe its location and what it was like for the people there that suffered from this earthquake?
Yeah, I stayed at home because I still had to make sure that all those things were getting done. So one of my department heads led the detachment, and he did a great job taking that team out there. But Haiti is southeast of the United States. It is a very poor nation that has a lot of challenges still culturally from their days as a slave nation, and the destruction of the earthquake what that caused made life that much more miserable. And so United States Navy, military, and other NGOs, et cetera, were able to come in fairly quickly, stabilize the situation with food and water and medical care, evacuation, those sorts of things to give the people hope. This is not an unusual mission by any means. Anybody who served in the military has probably participated either at home in something like a Katrina or a Harvey, or overseas. When I was doing my department head tour in Guam, we pushed everything that we had over to Indonesia after the tsunami, where well over 100,000 people were killed by that tsunami. And you just have to use your tools, your training, and your teamwork to go in there and respond as quickly as you can and try to help as many people as possible. So I think even though it was a terrible situation, the opportunity to do a real world mission like that really inspired the team as well. And it feels good when you get an opportunity to go out there and help people.
Yeah, I think about it similar to Puerto Rico. We had this devastating hurricane and everybody saw the damage, and they don't even realize that, just a couple islands over, Haiti, sharing the island with the Dominican Republic, their infrastructure is non-existent. So, I mean, my goodness, I don't even know how many people had running water there to begin with before this hurricane even hit. So I just encourage people to look it up, look at Haiti and look at that devastation and realize that there are poor nations so close to our borders that we don't realize.
I would add too, while people are looking things up, you can probably Google Haiti from space. I don't know if you've ever seen those night images, but there's a almost direct line between the well-lit Dominican Republic side of the island and the Haiti side of the island, which is almost completely dark at night.
Okay,
really
I will have to look
accentuates
that up. Yeah, because I've seen that with North Korea and South Korea, but I have not looked that up for Haiti, so I will definitely do that. So my next question for you, you transitioned from the hands-on world of flying H-60s to the strategic environment of the Pentagon, serving as a requirements officer for those same aircraft. How did your operational experience as a pilot inform your work in shaping the future of naval air warfare and managing its budget?
So that seat is it's one deep position that every community in naval aviation sends a representative to. So you're sitting in a big room in the Pentagon called the Ranch, N98, which is the Air Warfare Center. And you've got representatives of every type of helicopter, every type of fighter, the aircraft community, the aircraft carriers, the budgeting, the Marine Corps aircraft representatives. They're all in this big space, and it's a very wardroom-like feel. Everybody goes by call signs, and everybody gets along and tells stories about what they've done out in the fleet. But at the same time, these are hyper alpha competitive people who are trying to improve the quality of their platform and their people. And so there's a constant tension between how you represent your community and what you're trying to achieve to ensure that you have the resources to buy the number of aircraft you need, to upgrade those aircraft with new engines and sensors and weapons, and to make sure that you have the right plans in place and are coordinated with other entities, both to ensure that there's good integration out in the fleet, but then get the many voices and votes that come in from combatant commanders, from fleet forces, air forces, all community, commodores, etc., So it was a really fascinating perch to be in. And you have a pretty undue influence on the direction that your community will take from the perspective of being represented in the Pentagon, where the resourcing decisions are made. So you really find yourself a lot of times thinking about, if I have $1 to represent, do I spend it on this upgrade or that upgrade or this training thing or whatever that is? And that's really where you draw on your own individual experiences in the fleet, your perspective leading an organization like the Fleet Angels, and then you develop completely different skills, because typically in tactical units in the military, as you know, you're leading up or you're leading down, and then you've got peer leadership, but it's not the same when you're flying next to somebody as it is working with somebody in a different entity in the Pentagon that has different purposes and different perspectives than you do. And so you learn very quickly who you can kind of trust and work with to get your message and your desires resolved, and who's perhaps out to get your resources from.
I'm glad you bring up resources and how competitive it is, because if you watch the news, you think, oh, we have an $850 billion budget. We should be able to buy whatever we want. People don't realize how much of that is tied up into personnel costs, fuel costs, maintenance on aging weapon systems. It's not just this blank checkbook that you walk in every year and start spending
Right.
spending $850 billion. So it's very competitive. So
It is indeed. And you know, the complexities of the bases and our allies and the technology development commitments that we make across, you know, not just within DoD, but with our research centers and our academic partners. And there's all kinds of medical research and things that have to get done. And I heard this, and I've seen it in practice, that a lot of items that need to get done for the country end up getting put into the defense budget by Congress, because they know that's a way that they can guarantee it's going to get done.
That exact situation happened when I was in legislative affairs working acquisition sustainment. Congress told us, we're going to have you run some supply chain management for pharmaceuticals. We're like, wait a second, we're not the FDA. I mean, why are we doing this? And they said, quite frankly, well, Mike, we know that the DoD budget, you guys will actually execute and do what we ask you to. And I thought, wow, we just get thrown everything, and people just think $850 billion, you guys are rich, and it's really not the case.
Well, that's a great example. You validated my my theory.
Yeah, and this just happened, you know, a year and a half ago. So I feel your pain, even though I was in that building after you. So I found it interesting about your National War College experience. So I went to Eisenhower here at Fort McNair, loved it, wonderful experience. But you competed for a very special position, and it was with Shell Oil. Please share with us how a Navy guy who's a helicopter pilot gets to go work for Shell Oil. What was that experience like?
Oh, it was amazing. I had done my 2 years in the Pentagon, and I had the opportunity to serve as the executive assistant for N98 himself, but at that time, Rear Admiral Bill Moran. And he was starting to help line me up for what was going to come next, because I was still too junior for my 06 command board. And he said, hey, I've got this and this option. Are you interested in these? And I said, oh, hell no. I'm not. I got to get out of this building. I've done my 2 years. I never wanted to come here. It's been a great experience. I think working for you is amazing, sir. But no, I need to go do something else. And he paused and he looked at the window a little bit, and he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'd really love to go do a legislative fellowship on the Hill, but I'm a little over the hill for that, so to speak. You know, those are typically for younger officers. I said, so I've done some poking around, and there's these federal executive fellowships where you can go to a university or a think tank or something like that. And then there's this corporate fellowship where you get assigned out and into a company for a year. I said, I'd be interested in something like that. And so he wrote me a letter of recommendation. I applied, and I got selected as a SecDef fellow. They send, I think, 2 line officers per service, and then they also add on acquisition and guard folks to it. So each year changes a little bit in total size, but I think When I did it, there was 12 of us. We go through a little bit of a summer intensive in the DC area at CSBA, one of the think tanks, followed by some visits to the building to engage key leaders and get some words of wisdom before we depart for the year, some time on the Hill, that sort of thing. And then a week down at University of Virginia at Darden Business School, where we really kind of sharpen our pencils on the businesses that we're actually going to be going to. So you get to learn how to interpret a public filing and understand the financials and the strategy of your business. And then they move you off to these different companies all over the country. And you're still a military officer, but you get some special permissions to be able to participate at an executive level, wear civilian clothes, live on the economy, make your own schedule, and that's your assignment for the year. And you have a couple of deliverables. There's a mid-year checkpoint back at the Pentagon, and then there is an end-of-year report deliverable, and you get to put together what we call a company day. And the company days involve bringing other fellows and their sponsors and executives to your site and giving them a deep dive for anywhere from 1 to sometimes 3 days, depending on the complexity and the situation. And so I was able to host a Shell-centered company day towards the end of my year. That Shell is a major sponsor of the Jazz Fest in New Orleans. And so we brought folks in. We had a reception at the World War II Museum. We got to go in and meet the leadership team of Shell Deepwater. We got to explore their technologies and their training processes and understand how they go explore and extract oil and the commonalities that they face from a challenge perspective of austere operating environments, very public image challenges if things go south. And so a great learning opportunity. And I got the opportunity to meet Elon Musk at SpaceX. I got to go to Microsoft and Norfolk Southern Railroad and 3M and Morgan Stanley in New York City. So really neat exposure. And then the theory of it is you take those lessons back and you help bring new ideas and broaden the network for DoD in that. So that was an amazing experience.
Culturally, how similar or how different was it working in Shell Oil for that year versus being in the service?
So I was nested inside the North American logistics team, and that team supported each of the different main business units, deepwater, unconventionals, and drilling, et cetera. And so I got to talk to the people both within logistics and then get to know each of those different business units. Most of, I'd say 50% of the people in that logistics group were prior military. And so it felt very comfortable from the perspective of the culture and the type of people I was surrounded by and their willingness to help and appreciate what I was trying to do. And the operating environment out of New Orleans into the deep water was very Navy-like. And that's part of why I ended up there, because Shell had a look at the different fellows that year and they decided they wanted a pilot, but they really wanted a helicopter pilot. And I was the only one in the group.
So it seems like this was a real pivot in your career, because after this you went to ATI and really got your experience in the industrial base strategy world. Is that right? Explain that to me.
Yeah, so while I was at Shell, not long after I got there, I had selected for Navy captain and I was coming up on my 06 command board. And, they always tell you when you're serving that at some point you'll know when you're ready to move on. And I used to tell my junior officers when I was in command, I said, look, you've done a great job running on the treadmill of naval aviation to this point, but the big Navy gym has other things going on in it. And if there's something that you feel like you'd rather do for the good of the Navy and you would do better at it, I'm here to help get you there. And if you decide that you want to keep running and go further on that treadmill, this is the place to be, and let's do that. But if you want to go home and pop up your feet and have a drink and say, I did a great thing and I'm done with the Navy, that's fine too. You just got to be transparent with me, right? But in the end, that treadmill stops for everybody. And you need to know when that happens. And for me, I had dropped my kids off in the morning and I had this rare blessing of a month of being around my children and taking them into school every morning and going to their sporting events after school every single day and meeting people that were doing different things around in different companies. And I said, you know what? I think there's a lot going on out there that I'd like to explore and I'd like to get after it before, maybe I'm a little bit too tired and worn out. So I picked up the phone and called my detailer, and I told him I was going to put in a don't pick me letter for 06 Command. And I finished out my year and then got orders. We had to do a payback tour is what they call that. So I went back to the Pentagon and Navy operations for 3 more years. And it was during that time that I was really trying to figure out what I was going to do when I got out of the Navy. And it was hard. I had 3 years of, accumulated stress, not knowing where I was going to live, what kind of work I was going to do. Like a lot of us, I felt like I could do anything. If you look at the breadth of type of roles I'd had in the military and different services and different locations overseas, I could figure it out. But it turns out industry doesn't hire for anything. They hire for something. And I was just really lucky because after I had gotten back from Shell, I had mentored a guy, Matt Schnapoff, who was a 60 Romeo commanding officer out deployed on a carrier. And we got connected to a common acquaintance who had done that federal executive fellowship at Stanford. And he said, hey, my call sign was Skinny. He's like, hey, Skinny, I want you to talk to Schnapp and tell him about the corporate side because he's thinking about doing one. Okie doke. So we set up a call and I explained to Matt, I said, look, first of all, don't expect the Navy to love you for doing a fellowship because it's a year out of the Navy and the Navy likes people doing Navy stuff. But if you've got a good record and you're confident in that and you really want to do this, it's a life changer from the experience that you'll gain and the perspective and possibly the network. So he ended up going to Oxford University in England. And while I was a battle watch captain in the bowels of the Pentagon one day, I saw an N98 ops report come in from Matt Schnapoff. I picked up the phone and called, and I didn't realize he was in the building. And I said, hey, I'm about to retire. Let's go get lunch. And I picked him up. And the very first thing he asked me, he was like, hey, you're about to retire. What do you need to go do? I said, that's the challenge. Because at that point, my best opportunity was I was getting ready to go out to Seattle for a final interview to be the head of strategy for Amazon Air, which was this new thing they were standing up. But the challenge was it was Seattle, and my oldest had started 9th grade in Alexandria, Virginia. And a big part of that driver of not getting out and not doing 06 Command was one place for high school for my kids and me being there for them. So I wasn't going to geo-badge across the country. And Matt said, well, hey, if you're interested, my wife's uncle is a retired 4-star, and I had dinner with him last night, and he works for the Cohen Group, Secretary Cohen's consulting company, and they have a client that does metal products out of Pittsburgh, and they have a defense office in Crystal City, and they're looking for somebody like us to do business development. And that was it. A month later, I got walked out of the Pentagon. I got a call that afternoon and got offered the job, which I accepted a couple days later.
Our paths are so similar. I gotta unpack so much of that. So the last year as I was preparing to retire, I was in legislative affairs, working acquisition and sustainment, and one of my portfolios was industrial-based strategy. My father-in-law started off sweeping floors in phosphate mines in Central Florida and ended up being the CEO, turning that company over 7 times and eventually selling it for $300 million. So he was telling me, he's like, Mike, what you guys are learning in the military is exactly what it's like leading these small companies. So don't be afraid to retire and see what else is out there. My wife says I was schizophrenic that last year. I'm going to be a photographer. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to stay in. But I couldn't stay in because I would have missed my senior year, my son's senior year of high school. And then my youngest is getting ready to go in 9th grade. So I said, I stick it out. I become a general officer. And now I'm moving every year, most likely geo-batching because my family needs that stability to finish off school. So I just said, it's time to retire. But as I was talking to a lot of these retirement planning programs, they would say, hey, be really humble. You're going to take a huge pay cut wherever you go. This is just how it works. Industry just doesn't understand or speak your language. So you just have to accept the fact that that's how it goes. And I thought to myself, no, my father-in-law showed me how you can be successful on the outside. So I led my own path and said, I'm going to have 100 cups of coffee with 100 different people to figure out what the heck I'm going to do. And during those 100 cups of coffee, I figured out there's a lot of opportunities out there that you don't have to take that first chance. You don't have to take that GS job in the Pentagon or that low paying mid-tier leadership job because that's what they said that you deserved. So thankfully I had a mentor to allow me to understand those differences. But like I said, you and I are so similar from the standpoint of retiring for family and then you working for that company, understanding industrial-based strategy. I finally realized, hey, this supply chain logistics thing and all the minerals that we depend on for not only military service, but just our basic electronic components and things we use in the United States, they are far more important than the general public really understands.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Jeff Green was a lobbyist that we worked with when I got to ATI, and he had done a lot of work on the Hill and still to this day leads a lot of opinion pieces and work around rare earth strategies and titanium and the Berry Amendment and how we can try to understand the strategic implications that you're reading about probably every single day in the news right now and negotiations with China, right?
Yeah, we're in a tough moment right now because we're always chasing the lowest cost or the cheapest labor. And I mean, eventually that comes to an end, right? Kind of like that treadmill you were saying. Hey, you can run on that treadmill, but eventually it comes to a stop and everybody has to get off because their military service is done. Well, when it comes to seeking out low wage labor and critical minerals, eventually that treadmill comes.
It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think doubling back to the challenge of figuring out what you want to do, that really made an imprint on me. And one of the things I did while I was at Shell was I helped them and their military recruiter and their leadership and hiring managers and HR to better understand some of the barriers that they had internally to attracting and developing and promoting military talent. I mentioned so many military folks were concentrated in logistics, but there was almost nobody in the military in any other part of the business. It was very rare. And so those experiences and getting to go and kind of represent Shell and help these military people at conferences like the Service Academy Career Conference understand a little bit better about how they might be able to package what they were in a way that a company like Shell might be interested in, or any other company, frankly. And I had no idea that experience and then my own personal challenge with the transition and trying to figure something out and then mentoring people for the last few years as I worked at ATI and then at Vita Inclinata was going to set me up ultimately to run an organization that concentrates on career transition and placement.
And boy, you beat me to the punch. That's a perfect segue to what I was going to ask you next. And that's after achieving these successes in the military and private industry, you now lead this nonprofit, NextOp. How does helping an enlisted veteran find a meaningful, good-paying career represent the ultimate sustainable outcome for you personally?
I think that's it right there. I've come up with a little theory and I put it out there on LinkedIn because a guy I was mentoring said, I think you've kind of captured it well. And I said, well, let's throw it out there and see what people think. And it generated a decent amount of conversation, but there's really kind of three distinct phases to the transition. And we see it over and over and over again when candidates come to us. And I know that was part of the pressure that I was feeling, and probably you were, with the frenetic decision-making around, I need a job. Because I need a job to bring in money so that I can take care of my responsibilities, my family, and feel like I still have a purpose, right? You know, that's number one. And so ideally, you think about it, you have transferable skills, you're able to package yourself, those 100 cups of coffee turn into the right thing. Matt Schnapoff happens to meet you at the right time, and you find your way, right? But had I not had lunch with Matt that day, I don't know how long it would have been. And I've seen people struggle. And there's a lot of data that we see that shows that if you do struggle and you don't have that job when you need it, some bad things can happen, right? And it leads to financial stress, homelessness, dependencies, and suicide on one end. And then it can also lead to people taking the first job that they can get. And that leads to underemployment in a lot of ways. And so we talk a lot about how much success we've had as a nation around reducing veteran unemployment, and we have. But the next tranche of that is veteran underemployment. And there is a massive percentage of veterans who are underemployed. And I think that is one of the elements that contributes to this data point that veterans tend to leave their first job within the first year. Part of it is they were underemployed. They got some confidence. They realized how to tell their story and find that opportunity. That's a very perfectly good reason, right, for people to leave their job. But avoiding that underemployment up front and giving them the appropriate guidance to figure out their why, their what, their where, make sure they have a resume, make sure they know how to interview, make sure they get the opportunities and put themselves out there for success, both on LinkedIn as well as in in-person events, to network and get to know people and create those opportunities is vital. And coming out of the service, we're not told about the value of having a good LinkedIn profile, of networking. It's hard to do. I got a day job. I'm working long days. Why would I go to an alumni event tonight? Why would I go to this industry networking event? Why would I go talk to the people in my neighborhood who are having a block party about the fact that I'm getting out of the Navy and I want a job? Those kind of things are how you learn how to sell yourself, how you get feedback from others, how you create those serendipitous opportunities. And we just don't typically come out primed for that very well. And so after you've got that first job, the next thing becomes sustainability. So am I underemployed? Am I making enough money? Am I working too hard? Have I figured out how to recognize I'm not in the military anymore and put some boundaries around my life and make sure that I fulfill the things that are important to me, like being there for my kids' sports in the afternoon? Or am I working till 6 or 7 at night because I just don't know how to do anything different? So that sustainability becomes a piece of it. I recall towards right as COVID was hitting, I was probably pushing 3.5 years into ATI, and I had 5 straight weeks of travel scheduled. I had been fairly successful in the first couple of years, and it just kept opening more customers and more doors and more meetings and more conferences and more engagements. And they had started to add on international travel, which I was hungry for at the time because it was new opportunity and I was going to bring on more, but it was not sustainable. I didn't have enough vacation time. I worked long days. I was still missing events with my kids. We just weren't moving. That's really the thing that had changed. And so when COVID hit and I had an opportunity to change, I was not afraid to, I've never been afraid to make a change. And so maybe that's from moving around a lot as a kid and everything that I went through. But I went ahead and jumped at the next opportunity. And it was another great education, but again, not sustainable. And at the third phase that everybody wants to get to, and you can use lots of different terms for it, top of Maslow's pyramid or whatever, but it's about fulfillment. And veterans want to be involved in something that fulfills their need to serve and have a mission and an impact. And when NextOp appeared in the Naval Academy Shipmate magazine, run by Stephanie Drake, who I had met when she got out of the Marine Corps and joined Shell downstream and did that Service Academy conference visit with me with the military recruiter. I say, oh, I know Stephanie. What is Stephanie doing and what is NextOp? So I read the article and I was just blown away. I said, man, transition's hard. I watched my grandfathers get out of the Navy and, just kind of really not have any career afterwards. And there's a lot of enlisted guys out there, and I imagine they have it even harder than somebody like me with a business master's and a Naval Academy network and all that. So I got on LinkedIn and I hit up Stephanie and I said, Steph, I got to know more about NextOp. Tell me what you guys are doing. So we had a nice call. And at the end of that call, she told me that the organization, had gone through some pressure during COVID. People weren't allowed to get on base and recruit. You weren't having hiring fairs and people weren't hiring. And most of the HR and talent acquisition people have been sent home anyway. If they're not working, we don't need them. And so she said, we do really good work on the left side of this employment equation. We can recruit and we can help develop and we provide one-on-one coaching and we build confidence and trust because our employment coordinators are prior enlisted and they're in it for the right mission. And so what we need is the right side of that equation. We need to engage employers better and we need to create scale. And I said, well, I know how to grow and scale things. And I put my name in the hat. I started interviewing and kind of like with ATI, a month later, they offered me the job and I took over as Executive Director on Halloween of 2022. And that's what we've been doing for coming around towards 3 years now is growing that right side of the equation, driving, bigger numbers, bigger impact, professionalizing the team more, and it's fulfilling every single day. So I think I finally got to that place. They say, if you love what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life. I had to laugh at that. I was like, I love flying, but I felt like I was working. But now, I'm in an organization that just, you realize every single day you're changing lives.
Once again, there's so many things to unpack there. First off, by you saying working these long hours late into the night, being on the road, and you said, but if that's all you know, that's all you know. I'm dealing with that same thing now in my new job. I love my new job. It's fascinating. I have autonomy. I feel like I'm making a difference. But at the same time, I'm kind of getting sucked into those extra hours and things that I've just been used to doing the last 24 years. So thank you for that. Thank you for bringing me back to center and focus on, hey, maybe you shouldn't work so much, even though you're enjoying it. And then you mentioned LinkedIn. I've been telling people for years, look, you spent 20 years, or you name how many years, having an impeccable uniform, performance reports, always shooting for that top of the class. And then now you're getting ready to retire, and social media is our new avenue of networking. So you're going to take a selfie on your phone and call it good. I tell people, you've got all these recruiters on LinkedIn, and they're scrolling through thousands of people a day, right? So I said, let's teach you how to slow their scroll. And you slow their scroll, like right? You slow their scroll by having some sort of interesting page just to get them to stop for 2 or 3 seconds to perhaps, look at your profile or look at your banner screen and say, wow, I'm interested how that person did that. Or wow, that's a really sharp looking picture. But these guys that are taking, selfies next to brick walls, I'm like, my goodness, what did that 20 years teach you, right? And then the last thing you mentioned was that service, that finding your internal happiness. That's what Voice for Valor is for me, right? I am not getting rich off this in any capacity. I spend about $1,000 a month just to make all this stuff happen. But it's because I enjoy getting to know people like yourself and the differences you're making. And we all, the rising tides lifts all boats is my theory on this. And by you having a chance to share your story on NextOp, it's so satisfying to me, especially if it helps build the outreach and footprint of what you guys are doing.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. And I can't tell you how many of these podcasts I've just kind of found, through the network again. And I'm always happy to get on and tell the story and talk about NextOp and the work we do, because I know that you have a reach and people will hear it, and hopefully it resonates with them like that Shipmate article did for me. Excuse me. But doubling back to the LinkedIn piece, excuse me, I'm going to take a quick water. I was at Special Ops Command down in Tampa when LinkedIn was brand new. And sorry, I got something in my throat. There. Social media. You even used the term. The social media is how we network today. And SOCOM and SOF, not supposed to be on social media, right?
Ah, yeah, that's a great point.
Bad juju. And I think that's pretty well pervasive across the services. But I thought of it very differently. I said, LinkedIn is not social media. I'm not scrolling videos or posting funnies. This is a networking tool. And you'll recall, this was probably 2006 or 7. Every time you moved, email and cell phones were pretty new. So you had to get a new cell phone number and a new email address everywhere you went, because your email usually came through your cable and your cell phone was whatever local provider. And so I graduated from the Naval Academy in 1992. There was no internet, and there was no cell phone, and there was no Facebook, and there was no LinkedIn or any of those things. And so you immediately shotgun out in the fleet, and you might be at a training center with some buddies from your class, but very soon, by the time you get to your individual unit, you're lucky if 1 or 2 of your classmates is there. And you may bump into them out in the fleet at some point, but in most cases, you've completely lost track of them. And then suddenly email starts to come out, phones start to come out. but you couldn't discover anybody. It was only those that you already had, you know, in a particular place. And then you start to build up your little black book, you know, of people's mobile numbers and email addresses. But as soon as they moved, it was useless again. And I said, look, this is a brilliant tool, because if people are on LinkedIn and I'm connected to them, I can always reach out to them. I don't have to worry about what their email and their cell phone is anymore. And that was my logic of why I adopted it back at that time. And I can tell you going forward, you bring up an interesting point about the recruiters. My second job after the Navy at Vita was direct recruit from the CEO. And this job was enabled because I was able to reach out to Stephanie, who I had met years ago at that recruiting trip, and ask her about NextOp. And I leverage LinkedIn on a daily basis for updates on people, news and information about companies and who's made what move and things like that. And then the ability to go in and search for a particular title, a geography, or a company, even though you might only have 300 characters for that little cold call, I've gotten lots of business out of that little 300 character hook. And that's really all it is. It's a different form of stopping the scroll. If you can customize the note when you reach out to somebody in a way that makes them want to reply to you, you've got your win at that point. Don't just send the cold connection request. Take the effort to add a note. And if you're doing it on your phone, the default is no note. Just click the little 3-dot pancake, edit your response. That's how you can create wins.
Yeah, you know, when I first started LinkedIn, I did a lot of what you're saying, you know, those 300 words, try to capture their attention with some sort of hook just to develop a conversation. But then it becomes this snowball effect. So once you hit a certain level or certain number, and I don't know if it's because of the podcast or my photography, I don't know what it is, but you hit a certain number and then the momentum takes care of itself. So I probably have 3 to 5 people asking to connect with me on a daily basis. Whereas before, I mean, it took me weeks on end to just try to try and get a few to prove your worth out there. So I would just encourage people, look, it's going to be hard those first few months, but if you stick with it and you reach out to people like yourself or me and you're asking for help, I am more than happy to help anybody. But
and that's where the note is so key, because the volume does pick up, and I've got hundreds of requests sitting in an inbox. I don't deny them, but at the same time, I don't always have the ability to go in and look at a profile and see, is this a real profile? Is this somebody that's trying to sell me something? Or is it a veteran that, just needs access to my network and wants to ask me some questions maybe? So I think in general, and across the board, the veteran community is very positive about accepting requests and being willing to meet and being willing to share their ideas and their network across the board. But you've got to put that hook in the front. That's important.
So you've helped place thousands of veterans into new careers. Could you share one specific story of a veteran who came to NextOp, perhaps feeling lost or undervalued, and what their journey to a new career looked like through your program?
So usually I'm not down at the individual candidate level, but there are some. Usually if an officer comes to us, they end up coming to me because our focus is post 9/11 enlisted. And so there's been a few cases where I will mentor and guide and help connect. I look for partners too. Organizations like Mike Wallace's Blue Water Advisors serves a very niche group of more senior officers. And we have partnerships with organizations at the corporate level, like Hiring Our Heroes, where they refer candidates that don't fit their cohorts, but they serve spouses. And since we don't, those are great referral partners. But at the macro level, I do a lot of that kind of stuff. As far as the individuals, I'd say, not specific names, but building the pipeline that we have with the Navy that started with the training center in Danville, Virginia, ATDM, and then actually leveraging LinkedIn to get connected to Whitney Jones, who was the Navy's Maritime Industrial Base lead via that 300 character hook, she wrote me back because I said, we're partnered with ATDM. We help enlisted. We want to do more in the submarine industrial base. And she scheduled a call and spent time with me and then told me about Blue Forge Alliance, which we've been able to partner up with and get funding and build out our aerospace and defense program from, and go from 100 submarine placements to 300 maritime emplacements this year. And that whole build out, and then seeing these people who express interest in a website like buildsubmarines.com. Yes, I want to help build giants, but they have no idea how to walk that path and to be able to reach out and connect those people and guide them through machinist training and then help them get hired at a company that's building components for ships and submarines on the backside. Those cases happen over and over and over again, and it's that's the stuff that's really gratifying. But I don't think I could give you one specific name or case.
Well, it's a small world because I know Whitney. I worked with the buildsubmarines.com piece when I was in industrial base strategy through Adele Ratcliffe.
Yeah,
and
so she
Adele
helped fund ATDM.
Yeah, so Adele Ratcliffe is the one that introduced me to Whitney. So once again, small world. And Whitney just recently left her position and went off to hopefully greener pastures. I was sad to see her go. I said, no, the buildsubmarines.com, they need you. They need you. So, but she's
doing well. We were actually just texting each other last week.
Perfect. That's good to hear. So obviously you have a unique vantage point leading a veteran workforce development organization. What is the biggest challenge or opportunity you see for America's workforce over the next 5 years? And how are veterans uniquely positioned to meet those needs?
You know, there's a lot of counter currents going on right now with the emergence of AI and concerns about people losing their jobs. But at the deck plate level, our numbers keep going up every single year. And I think understanding and being able to pitch the value proposition of what a veteran brings to a company and then connect that in a systematic way to really, I think in oil and gas terms a lot, right? You know, to create a pipeline. Where is that source? How do you extract that source, refine that source, and deliver it to the point of need in order to create value? And we have a lot of well-funded and well-intentioned islands of excellence out there, and being able to go around and connect each of those in order to create those steps of value and then work together with partners to build an ecosystem that can scale is it's a huge opportunity. I think it will finally put in place if we can create a little bit less of a gap of the folks that are coming out, get further upstream with the messaging on the value of preparing for transition, networking, organizations that can provide those services with confidence that they can trust, and then create real outcomes. I think that's going to start to make a real big difference in our need across multiple industries where a actual hands-on workforce is required.
Yeah, my oldest son, he's interested in cars, and I'm trying to get my younger son interested in some of the trades as well, because I keep telling him, look, these trade specialties are going to be the last to be replaced by AI and robots. I mean, it's probably going to be, it's pretty safe to say that plumbers are going to have jobs for the foreseeable future. Whereas I was I was a pilot like you, and everybody says, oh, you should go to the airlines. And I thought, I don't really want to go seek out a job that I already know could be is replaceable today. The only reason we haven't replaced it is just getting rid of this, or getting ready for the social changes that is of an airplane being unmanned when it's flying passengers all over the world. So I was like, I'd rather be focusing on people and making a difference at this entry point level of, soldiers, sailors, and airmen, rather than sitting on the airplane.
Well, I'll give you a little quick vignette, and it's around this trades discussion. I already told you about ATDM and the work we're doing in the maritime industrial base, but we had a unique breakthrough in the last couple of weeks. Headquartered in Houston, have never received any state-level funding from Houston to support our nonprofit work, or from the state of Texas. And, living in Virginia, going to Texas occasionally, hadn't really cracked the code on that. But we partnered pretty recently with an organization called Forge Now, run by Rob Holmes, who's a West Point grad. And Rob and I just started talking, and we started saying, okay, what can we do here? How can we get more veterans into your program? They do skilled trades around electricians, HVAC, and a few others. And his whole purpose is creating this schoolhouse to get people into these trades that are going to give them good quality of life, and there's a high demand for them going forward. To your point, we're not probably going to see robots walking in people's houses and diagnosing and repairing HVAC systems soon. And so I like their mission. I thought that this lined up really well with the type of talent that we can bring in, and we can bring an organization like Forge Now into our marketing and into our events and let them talk about what these opportunities are. You come through this program, you get 12 weeks of training. Now you're ready to go out and work in this industry and learn your trade. We're building even further now, and what's really exciting as we have grown and expanded our geographies and our impact at NextOp is we're starting to see a new wrinkle in our programming around conferences that are built around specific industries. So we did a vet tech conference with AWS in May, and now we're looking at expanding that and hosting that at different universities around the country. That model is wonderful because it allows either student veterans or other veterans that are interested in that particular industry to come to hear from some panelists, to engage with employers and learn about the different types of employers that are in that space, the different types of opportunities that are there, network and start building a network in person. And whether that's just informational up front or it's I need a job right now, it suits that full spectrum of veteran candidates. And so with that success, we're now starting to see through some other partnerships like Owners in Honor in Houston that's run by a retired Green Beret, and some other conversations. I've got one coming up with Syracuse at IBMF. There's this whole idea of veterans owning businesses or working at veteran-owned businesses out there. So I had a conversation yesterday with VetFran, and we're starting to pull together this idea of probably supporting their programming, maybe doing some webinars, and then building up to a veteran business ownership conference that talks about owning franchises, starting businesses, or becoming someone off that, say, Forge Now trail that has 3 to 5 years of experience in HVAC and they're ready to start their own business now, or buy the person that they've been working with business from them. And then this would introduce financing, mentorship, education, all of the wraparound support that you would need to go out and start your own business or own your own business. And so I think there's very little of that happens, particularly for the enlisted force out there. And it's going to create a really exciting, potentially national level opportunity for this kind of engagement.
So Shelby, that brings me to my last question. As we wrap up, for the business leaders listening, how can they partner with NextOp? And more importantly, for that E5 getting ready to leave the service who might be listening right now, what is your direct message to them?
Yeah, so our website's pretty simple and it's pretty straightforward. It's www.nextopvets.org. And if you go there, there's essentially 3 primary functions. I'm a veteran looking for employment. I want to hire veterans, or I want to donate to support the NextOp cause. And so in every case, it's a very simple registration. You go in there, the system collects data. We use Salesforce as our backbone system, and you'll get an immediate acknowledgement that you're registered. If you're a candidate, you'll be paired up with an employment coordinator. That employment coordinator will be your coach and guide through the whole process, and the service is completely free. For the employers, you'll be registered in our database, and then you'll be reached out to by someone in our programs team in a leadership position that will set up an initial call to talk about your interests, the type of roles that you're interested in, what your experience with veteran hiring is. Do you need potentially some help coming in and identifying barriers? Are you interested in standing up a skill bridge program, or do you have a robust military program already and we just need to operationalize our talent with you? And we do that usually through virtual programming and job description sharing. Put those job descriptions into our system. We've got some automated matching in there that could identify weighted matches right away. And then there's some process that happens in there to engage that individual and see if they're interested. But we've got over 600 candidates in the pipeline right now, so there's a chance. And then the virtual programming is usually 25 to 50 candidates that are expressed interest in either the logo, learning more about the industry, whatever that is, and that can spark interest as well. And then we just take it from there and tailor and build programs.
Well, Shelby, thank you so much for coming on the show. NextOp, I look forward to seeing where you guys go with this. If you have 600 in the hopper, that's impressive. So I look forward to seeing
I'll tell
where
you,
guys go.
today we hit 604 placements for the year. Our target is 1,100 this year, which last year was our all-time high at 773. And 604 was our pre-COVID high. So we tied the 2019 record today on August 1st.
Oh,
So
wow.
I feel like we're tracking towards our 1,100 goal this year, and we're only planning to go higher and higher.
Well, congratulations. You guys are growing fast. So we
Thank
will,
you, Michael.
we'll cut it here, and let me clap just so I know where to cut it off. But I just wanted to chat with you more. I love what you guys are doing. I mean,
Yeah, it's a very compelling mission. There's so much need for it, and we've had people. Department of Labor has been a pretty big grantor of ours, and they've asked us if we'd be willing to expand our program into other communities of interest. And every time I tell them no, not because it wouldn't work or because it's not the right thing to do. And I'd be happy to coach somebody else that wanted to start a similar organization for those other communities. But at 1,100 placements out of 175,000 enlisted people coming out of service this year, and about 7 million post 9/11 working age enlisted out there. Not that we ever intend to be or could be the entire solution, but there's just so much more work we can do in this vertical, and we're good at that. So we need to stay focused on that.
I need to introduce you to Justin Henderson. If you don't already know Justin, he lives out of Boston, and I think it's called Veterans Hiring Solutions.
Okay.
He's on LinkedIn like you. He's got thousands of followers, and he's doing well. But it's all about kind of what you're doing. He's focusing more on the blue collar job. He's working with industry and explaining what particular words mean in the military and what that equivalent is on the civilian side. And then he's interviewing these, these small manufacturing plants, figuring out exactly what they're looking for, and then saying, hey, I've got people that can do this for you. And so they're creating like these 3 to 5 minute videos with these small businesses explaining what they're looking for. And then Justin helps them translate their resume, their language into that particular job role just to get through the HR nonsense. I mean, the manufacturing teams already know they want these guys and gals, but they got to get through the HR firewall.
It's real, I'll tell you, and the bigger the company, the more real and powerful it is, I'll tell you that too. But small and mediums do tend to be the lion's share of who hires our talent and who we work with, just because a lot of the real work gets done by my employment coordinators out there in the field. And they're prior enlisted guys who are just concentrated on getting their candidates ready and getting them connected to a job, right? That's the focus. And they're not going to go sit down with HR and talk about what all the different barriers are and putting a program in place in most cases. We have certain examples like Shell and Chevron and companies like that we work with that we spend that kind of time on, but it's very draining.
Yeah. Well, as we finish up here, I went through Mike Wallace's program as well, and I was the first.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I was the first Air Force guy to ever go through his program, and he's the one that I really took his LinkedIn training to heart. And then I also went through the Commit Foundation, and the Commit Foundation. I mean, it was just it was phenomenal. I mean, it was life changing because I would have never been doing this stuff that we're doing right now if it wasn't for the Commit Foundation. I've always been a photographer, so I was going to still do the photography thing. But when it came to storytelling and getting to know other military veterans out there and trying to help them, I hadn't even thought about it until I met
Commit pulled it out of you.
Yeah, Commit pulled it out of me, and I'm thankful they did. Like I said, I'm still a little over $1,000 a month out of my own pocket to make this happen. But I think eventually I tell people some billionaire or multi-millionaire will appreciate what I'm doing and be like, Mike, what's it take to make this thing run? Because I keep telling people, look, I'm not a nonprofit because I enjoy interviewing whoever I want. I don't want to talk to a board. For instance, I interviewed openly trans Army colonel, and I shared that with some of my mentors, and they said, well, why would you do that? You'll lose followers, you'll upset people. I was like, but I think what's important is this is a veteran that's trying to get their story out and let people know, hey, there's no different than anybody else. So there's really no need to be fearful of them. And I thought, okay, so if I was a nonprofit, I wouldn't be able to interview her. And I think I would rather be able to do it the way I want to do it. And then I said, I'll be openly transparent. You can see all my financials, and any profit that's actually made from this will go towards either tech refreshes and increasing my capabilities from a production value and off to other veterans organizations. This is not my bread and butter plan.
You know, I've heard people use nonprofit and not-for-profit, and I'm not sure if people understand if there is a difference, but it sounds like the way you're doing this is more of a not-for-profit.
Yeah.
It is technically a for-profit business, but you don't intend to make the profit, right? And so I think, you know, I don't pretend to understand what it takes to run a podcast, but I appreciate what you're doing. And you'd be surprised if you ask how many people will be willing to, you know, it might not be a billionaire, right? But it might be a number of sympathetic companies that would be willing to do some low level of sponsorship. Like, hey, if you give me $1,000, that'll cover 1/12 of my annual programming, right? And then
and that was the
20 of those.
That was the other thing I was thinking. I'm talking to my brother. He's a senior executive at Amazon. I said, hey, Nick, you know I'm not trying to get rich with this. But I said, what if I found you employees that Amazon eventually hired? How much are you paying, headhunters for these guys? I said, most headhunters are in that 50% range of the first year salary. So I said, if Amazon became my $20,000 a year sponsor. Now you could be one of the main commercials that I talk about, and you could also be the first business I try to generate business for. Right? And my brother Nick was like, I got it. That's a really good idea. So he said, just keep working on what you're doing, see if it builds any traction. He says, the more you do, the more content you create, the easier it is to sell that idea to some of these Fortune 500 companies. So.
Yeah, and Amazon's a great example. I think we're approaching 50 all-time hires with Amazon, but they're all over the country. And so I took that data and I went and I know, do you know Bo Higgins?
Yeah.
So, Bo had been at Amazon and when I met him, and then he moved on, and he's from New Orleans. And so I'm down there a lot and we do things, and he comes to our events and stuff. And I was like, who do I need to talk to at Amazon about the fact that, we've put 50 people into their company, and I'd like to see if there's an opportunity to be a little bit more intentional and partner with them. And they've been incredibly squishy jello. Very difficult. Even though I sat down and had coffee and laid everything out, like Ian, I can't remember Ian's last name, but he was the Amazon military guy.
Yeah. So my brother is he's one of the I think he's employee number 8,000. So he's a senior executive, makes millions of dollars a year.
Wow.
Knows Bezos personally. And even him, I can't get a hard commit out of him. When I went to his office in Seattle, you mentioned Prime Air. The Prime Air office is right here. My brother's office is right here. And then Amazon TV, whatever their television production company is. So just to give you an idea where my brother's office is, and so I'm like, oh my God, this is like budget dust to you.
Right. So rolling back real quick to Norm, Mike Wallace, when I was doing the phone interviews with the guy that was running Amazon Air, he mentioned they had just hired a Navy CAG that was going to come in and do the operational side of it. And since I never took the interview, Schnapoff got me the option with ATI, and I told Amazon, sorry, it's not going to work. I never got to meet Norm, but that was him. And then when I started at NextOp, I saw what he was doing on LinkedIn on Blue Water. So I just reached out and I was like, hey, I don't know you, but we're Navy pilots and I'm going to do this. And so we've developed a pretty good friendship, and he's bringing me out to every time he comes up to Annapolis for this work that he's doing at the Naval Academy. I go to his socials to see him and stuff. And we were talking last time, and we put 2 and 2 together that I would have been working with him at Amazon Air. He was the CAG.
Yeah, I remember him sharing the Amazon story and how much he hated it.
Yeah. Well, my old Commodore, Todd Flannery, now works in my old job at ATI, and he was at Amazon for a number of years in a fulfillment center on one of their leadership development programs. And he's a retired 06, retired out of Ledge Affairs, goes to work at Amazon at a fulfillment center as a leadership development guy. I was like, what made you think that was a good idea, Flan?
Yeah.
So he's much happier now.
Yeah. No, thank you. So yeah, I know
Well, Michael.
Todd. Oh, I know
You know,
Todd. Yeah. I know
Yeah, he was
Todd.
in Navy Ledge Affairs.
Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, he's at ATI now.
Okay, yeah, perfect. The company that's headquartered out of Oregon, right?
ATI was headquartered in Pittsburgh. They moved their headquarters to Dallas in the last year and a half because they rebranded as an aerospace and defense company. But he's in the Crystal City Defense Office where I worked after.
Yeah, Todd was working on, and Todd's a former helicopter pilot as well.
Yeah, that's what I said. He was my Commodore.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay, yeah, I do know Todd. Okay, small world.
Mhm.
All right, well, Shelby.
Yeah, sounds like we got a lot of commons.
We do. Well, thank you so much.
And are you in DC?
I am. I live in Fairfax. I live right next to George Mason University.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm down in the Fort Hunt area by Mount Vernon.
Okay, not far at all.
So, yeah, we'll have to get together at an event or something.
Sounds good. Thank you, Shelby.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Michael.
You as well. Thank you.
All right, cheers.